Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third of this year's series of webinars. And we've got a nice surprise for you this evening. A little bit different from the cutting edge physiological nutritional science, and we're going to get into the kitchen. I've just been reminded I need to record, but I am recording. So we're going to get into the kitchen and do something a bit different with my wife, Rachel. And I just want to introduce her. She's a very special and very individual person. She's an ex-South African triathlete. So high-level athlete. She still is very, very active in terms of sport and exercise. But ever since I've known her, she's been very much a foodie, very interested in food quality, where it's coming from, how to prepare it. So I've had many good treats over the years. But lately, she's wanted to go a little bit further with that. So it was about 3 years ago now that she started studying again. She's an she did sports science at university and physiology, psychology. So I'm just muting, good. But then she went in and studied with the School of Natural Cookery, and that's in Colorado in the US. And she's now a teacher for them. And I've never come across anything like it. So it's basically evolved my practice as a nutritional therapist to get more and more into food. So yes, I do all the fancy biochemical tests and the genetic tests and all the other sort of stuff that we host in these webinars I get into, but more and more I've got down into the quality of people's food. And I've seen personally how much difference that can make. Now this year, on the back of our certificate course in integrative sports nutrition, we decided to do an add-on, which we call Module 4, or it's a standalone module in natural sports cookery. And in line with that, we've got it starting again later in May. In line with that, we thought we'd put on this webinar just to give you exposure to Rachel and to let her tell you more about the style of cooking that she does, which is, as I say, very different from most approaches that I've seen. So tonight, we'll let Rachel present, but we like interactive webinars. So if there's any relevant questions that come up as she's talking, please type them into the chat box. And if it's relevant at the time, I'll ask it of her. Otherwise, we've got time at the end for a Q&A. Rach has been prompted to not go over 40 or 45 minutes to give you plenty of time to ask her questions. We've just had haggis, neeps, and vegetables here in Ayr, Scotland, so we're good to go. We're very keen to know where you're from, so check out the chat box. Make sure you know how it works and type in A, where are you in the world? B, what do you do? And C, what would you like to get out of tonight's webinar? Okay, off you go. And with that, I'm handing over to you, Rach.
Okay, hi there, everyone. Ian, I can't get the chat box up, so I'm going to leave that one to you to inform me when I'm in presentation mode. Right. So welcome to today. This is one of the this is the only course that exists in the world that we've created. What I'll do is I'll start telling you why it's different to classical cooking and show you the differences. We'll talk about the concept of wholeness, which is a big part of the course as well. Another huge section that we discuss as part of the course is food energetics. And this is just really amazing stuff, groundbreaking stuff, actually. And then we look at meal compositions, about how we put the meal together. And then we go into sports-specific considerations, and that would be making your own sport juice from home rather than taking the chemically tainted juices that you're able to buy from the stores. And then basically we'll introduce the course and then open up to any Q&As at the end. So how is our course different to the courses out there? Well, first of all, when you're classically trained, you're not encouraged, or you're not required to use your intuition. You get given a recipe and you follow the recipe and you create that recipe. Thank you very much, done, and there you go. Now with this course, you get trained to access your intuition. And we do this through focusing on various energy centers, and one in particular being the heart. And then we also try and work with you getting into your right brain. So we come from a world where we trained dominantly left brain, which is the analytical, which is told what to do, which is following recipes and so forth. We have an amazing model in our program where you actually stare at her. She's a dancer. You stare at her and you learn to get access to your right brain. And then we encourage you to continue working with that dancer, so you can know what it feels like to be in the right side of your brain. So generally, I bet most of you ordinarily when you're in the kitchen, you just go on autopilot, and that is, oregano and basil work well together. It's part of the Italian cuisine. Well, I'm going to throw that in because I'm doing some sort of mix today. So it's now what we're doing is we're telling you to, or teaching you to access your own creativity. And maybe it won't be the basil and the oregano. It might be something like fennel seeds, for example. It might be something completely unique. But what we do is, if we listen to our body, we naturally get drawn to the foods that we need, believe it or not. But we've got to listen, and we forget to listen. So we get taught to listen. And so we're able to access that important intuition. And we're able to access that creativity. And how we do this, we often work with herbs and spices and salt. So we know, if we are trained, where to access, well, how to access it and how much of what we need to access in order to put it into that dish. We're taught different theories as well. So we have 3 different theories that we work with, where again you're used, these theories help you access your intuition as well, and bring in your creativity. And then we are also taught to access all of your senses. And this is very important because in classical cooking, senses aren't even spoken about. Let's give you a taste of how we access our senses. Well, obviously we use our eyes to see if our food is ripe and it's not rotting. We use our eyes to see if something's done. We use our hearing. So all these 5 senses are used all the time when you cook. We use our hearing when we maybe dry roasting a grain, for example, and after we've washed it, we need to hear the sandy sound. We need to hear the sound of popping seeds or popping spices. So we're listening for that to know on readiness. We're touching all the time, and I encourage putting herbs and spices and salts into your hands, and we squeeze and press out the essences through our fingertips, and we connect with our heart center, and this gives us feedback, our body and feedback on how much to apply to the food, for example. We're tasting to see what spice or herb might work well in a particular dish. We're tasting to see if the flavors are balanced and that there's not traveling flavors. Taste is an important part of cooking. And then smell. So instead of saying, okay, well, this certain food is going to take 45 minutes to cook, we smell the food first, and that tells us to check to see if the food is ready. So using these senses is very important for determining, preventing overcooking, preventing rancidity of oils, and so forth. And then what we also do is we upgrade to wholeness. Now, how do we upgrade to wholeness? Well, we do this by, we go through it in depth, where we pick whole grains over refined. I teach you about the processing methods as well. So how we improve and amplify the nutritional density and flavor of foods in our diets. This gets taught to you. Everybody thinks that healthy food is about iceberg lettuce and tasteless tomatoes, right? It's about salad. That's all you need to eat. If you want to be healthy, you need salad. This is so much more than that. It's teaching you how to get the most out of a grain. So dry roasted, where you action the oils, you enliven the oils, you create some sort of nuttiness before you've even started cooking the grain. So this is a pre-treatment. We do this with herbs and spices. We do this with nuts and seeds, where we accessing, so how we amplifying the nutrients is we're awakening, we're enlivening the nut or seed or grain and waking it up and saying, come on now, work for us. We want you to taste amazing. And so you amplify the flavors and the oils and you get the most gorgeous end result. So it's about foods that taste absolutely beautiful. So healthy food is about every single meal being absolutely delicious. Not only some of the time they're good and some of the time they're not. It's being able to understand the techniques on how to crystallize natural sugars found in vegetables and amplifying that, and then having those sugars go back into that vegetable and making it taste absolutely amazing. Our barometer for this in our family is our children. Children don't eat food that tastes like nothing. So they eat our food. So, and they eat it wholeheartedly. And that on the occasion have the luxury of going to having a school lunch at school, and they'll come back. I'll say, how was your lunch? Oh, overcooked carrots, mum. The cauliflower was revolting. It was overcooked. How do a 5 and a 7-year-old know about overcooked vegetables? They don't, because they don't get it at home. But they came home and that's what they were saying. So I think that could potentially be their only bit of understanding, unless they've heard it from a friend whose parents overcook the vegetables and they can make that link. I'm not sure. But it's really about making foods taste amazing. And then we discuss in depth about the difference between processing and refinement. So as cooks, so we're not teaching you to be a chef. We're just teaching you how to cook and amplify your foods to a high and take them to a new level. We as cooks process food naturally. Think about it. We take some nuts and we will turn it into a nut butter. That's a form of processing, not refinement. Refinement is different. Refinement, there are levels of refinements as well, and those are found, in other words, taking an olive, a whole olive, and then taking it into a tapenade, which is a processing method. But then start extracting the oils from it, and that's when you start getting refinements. So, you know, this is taught in depth, and at what points, you know, you say no to refinements. We go into depth about understanding how food grows, particularly with plants. And this is important because plants grow vertically. So they either go up towards the heavens or they grow down towards the earth. They are incredibly independent plants. All they rely on is nature, water, sun, and then they reproduce and they grow. And these are the kind of foods we need to eat. Now you'll find in the genetically modified varieties that the seeds aren't able to reproduce. So they're only able to grow once and then that's it. And within that seed, there are pesticides and, nasty things that are not beneficial to human health. So it's important from an energetic point of view that we understand how plants grow in order for us to get the value of them energetically. We also categorize the vegetables in a culinary way, which is different to the botanical way that some sort of scientists discuss vegetables. For an example, like cruciferous vegetables. These would, in botanical terms, would mean cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, whereas in our terms, you know, the broccoli and the cauliflower represent flowers and the cabbage is a green leafy vegetable. We categorize this because it's important to know their relationship to the sun, the plant's relationship to the sun. So in other words, if the plant gets to see the sun a lot, then we know that the cooking time is less because it receives fire throughout its growth. Fire is the sun. If It doesn't say like a carrot, which grows underground, it doesn't see the sun. It means that that particular vegetable can store a lot of fire, store a lot of energy. And not only does the carrot have an energetic value, but the way, the cooking method and the way you're going to prepare that carrot will have a unique energetic value as well. We stress the absolute importance of variety and quality in the plants. And we stress this because we have cooking methods that are taught where if a plant is properly sprayed with a herbicide or an agrochemical, that chemical gets leached out into a pan, it gets crystallized and heated, and we don't actually know, the maybe potential carcinogenic effects of that chemical once it's heated in that particular way and connected with the metal. But it's, in the end, it's about flavor, right? So what happens with commercial farming is that they use quick releasing fertilizers. And what that means is that the food becomes watered down. So there's a lot of water in each cell. Think about when you purchase a chicken that's been injected with a brine. You have to work so hard for that chicken to taste like chicken. And that's because it's been there's water in it. So when you have naturally grown, wild harvested organic produce, when you're working with that, then naturally the sugar content is high because they're working well with the soils. And then the variety is when we eventually work into meal composition towards the end, we're looking at the different families of vegetables, grains, proteins. We're looking at all those and encouraging, the use of ones that you've never ever seen before, ever tried to work with. And we're encouraging doing a continual variety. So for example, if an athlete's told, you've got to eat a lot of broccoli, it's not going to serve them to eat the same broccoli every single day, because eventually they'll get sick of it. Or what happens is people develop sensitivities, not necessarily to the broccoli, but one particular grain, could be eggs, it could be anything. And those sensitivities come because we're eating too much of the same thing. So this is important, where we can start pushing the sensitivity scale to the side, and we get people going back to natural foods, back into variety, back into selection, back into seasonal produce. The oranges and the guavas are there in winter for a reason. They're there for the vitamin C. That's a fact, and that's what we need to support. We need to not support, when it's not fig season, but you want fig seasons, when you need it, because you're making a specific recipe. It's about being able to substitute, and this is what we teach as well. So if a recipe calls for a particular vegetable, say it's a carrot and you've only got potatoes, because of the different families, that you can substitute in that way. Again, looking at the animal side of things, so if the plants grow vertically, the animals move horizontally across the earth. They don't really burrow in vertically like a plant does. They move along the surface. Animals are social. They need another animal in order to reproduce. So this, again, comes with a unique energetic value, which we spent a whole day's lecture talking on the energetic value of different proteins. And we focus again on the ethical sourcing and the quality of the meat. Can't stress this enough. If that animal that's being consumed is pumped with antibiotics, it's pumped with growth hormones, or anything that shouldn't be part of that constitution, you eat it. So the person buying that kind of food gets to consume exactly what that animal ate. And this is something you need to be serious about. When we're working with athletes, they are pushing their bodies to the limit, especially when we're talking about upper class, higher end athletes. They are pushing and pushing. They do not need to find antibiotics or hormones in their body to make their body push it into the liver, make their body spend excessive, unnecessary energy trying to get rid of these chemicals. They don't need that. When an athlete has downtime, you want them to recover wholesomely and properly. And we do this by encouraging traditional practices in cooking, by giving them whole foods, energetically whole cooking methods. And that's why it's so essential that the quality is so important. To give you an example of that, let's look at a chicken. So it's so easy to work with animals and energetic nutrition because animals have a mono diet. In other words, they eat one thing. So if we have, I don't know, how many do they put? They have those big batches in the commercial farms where there's just like a fortune of chickens shoved into some sort of cage or sort of warehouse unit. And they're all squashed in their 23-hour sunlight. They get an hour of darkness. They're force-fed. There's tubes going on. They're all squashed. One in behind is picking the one in the bum in the front, and the other one to the right of it is stepping on its foot, and the other one to the left is scratching at its feathers. And what this means is that the farmer has to feed antibiotics to these animals to prevent them from getting ill and getting infections. And this is done continually. I know the animals, chickens in South Africa, sadly only have a 37-day lifespan. I'm not sure about the chickens around the world. And this is a very, very sad case. The chickens don't get the opportunity to go pick around the grass and eat the insects and worms and everything else they can find. They don't even see the sun. In their 37-day life, they don't get to see any of that. So we want to encourage people to go out there to find those chickens that peck at the worms and live a life that a chicken should live. Because what's happening is those angry chickens and those sad chickens and those frustrated and just irate chickens, you get to, the person eating that chicken is absorbing those energetic qualities as well. So they're getting that hatred, they're getting the anger, they're getting the irritation, everything that comes with a chicken, they're getting that when they consume the chicken. There was another study done on horses, and I love using animals because they're easier to, it's harder to, this is more subtle in humans. It's easier when, you're just eating one thing. And there was a study done on horses, and a lady owned a ranch, and she was having problems with the horses all of a sudden. Now the horses were being fed corn, and they were irritable, and she had to close her school for a couple of months because they were just, they weren't rideable. They were just frustrated. They were, they were bucking. They were doing a whole load of things that they shouldn't be doing, which could have, impacted her school negatively. So she was recommended to change their diet. And what she did was she changed their diets to oats. So off the corn, which is genetically modified and just full of insecticide and the whole thing, and into some wholesome oats. And what happened to the horses? It grounded them, it stabilized them, it made them lean and muscular and a far more athletic looking horse than they'd ever looked when they were on the corn diet. So they were rideable again, and the school opened and everything was, continued as normal after that. But there was a different look about the horses. Now, if you look at the energetic value of an oat, for example, it is a very grounding, energetically, it's a grounding grain. Energetically, you would give an oat to even a weak person, that needs that energy. Oats would give you energy. You'd give it to a cold person because there's a warmth about oats. So these are all different energetic properties that we teach in this course. And, it just has some really good value. Maybe if you had an anorexic gymnast, as an example, encouraging a whole grain oat porridge worked into her eating plan somehow would be very, very beneficial. So in the energetic nutrition, each vegetable and grain and protein comes with unique energetic properties. An example, I've just discussed the oat as part of the grain. I spoke about the chicken as part of the meat. Let's talk about the vegetable. What about the carrot? Let's think about the carrot. The carrot grows downwards. The carrot comes with a very grounding, stable, energetic value. So a carrot cooked will give with a particular method will give a very calming or even sustainable energy when it's consumed. So one of my friends did an experiment with a masticating juicer, and she juiced a carrot, and she'd forgotten about it. So she juiced the carrot put it in a glass, and she actually forgot about it. Now, what a masticating juicer does, instead of annihilating the cells of the vegetable, it just chews at it. And what she noticed when she came back was that the carrot tried to become the carrot again, but in the glass. So the red sugar cells started coming together to create the carrot. So the essence of the carrot, the energetic essence of the carrot is downward. It does, and it knows what to do. And what it does, the essence of it is it grows down. It doesn't ever grow up to the sky. It just knows to grow down. And that's what it does energetically into the human body. So it's going down, even though we are absorbing it like we would ordinarily absorb it, through the regular digestion processes. The essence is downward, which is very grounding and rooting. Then each cooking method has a unique energetic property. So we teach 10 different cooking methods in this course, and one of them being pressure cooking. And if you think of what goes on in a pressure cooker, it's a heap of energy. And maybe if it was a grain, the grains are bursting open. If it was beans, the beans are bursting open, and the skins are breaking. So it's a very good get up and go cooking method. So if you had a boxer, for example, and he was about to, or any athlete who was ready for a competition, and you needed to get them up and fire them up and get going, a pressure cooking method would be a good method because of the energetic value of that specific cooking method. Whereas a slow cook could be something like a long endurance run, for example, where you would maybe slow cook some oats before a race, a long staged race. You would include those sorts of cooking methods to sustain, because slow cooking requires a lot of fire over a long period of time. So this, has its own impacts on athletes. Over and above the cooking method, the vegetables that you choose and the way you prepare it will have their own energetic properties as well. So if you had an athlete who had a crazy competition day, and that perhaps they'd won and they were elated and they were driven and the adrenaline was there and they were just like high, on an adrenal high, you would choose like a good slow cooked stew. So animals are grounding because they can only stay on the ground. You would choose something like that with so the cooking method with some carrots and potatoes, some rooty vegetable, to try and pull them back in again, pull themselves towards themselves is a term we use, to explain people, to explain sorts of people. And just to give you another example is, I know a good friend of mine who denies herself meat when she really does need meat. And what I do is, after I've had a conversation with her, she's all over the place. So she's like a butterfly. She'll be bouncing from one topic and then another topic. And I'm thinking, where's her head? She's all over the place. And I'll come home and I'll say to you, God, she just needs a steak. And that's just a grounding thing. She just needs some grounding, or a piece of fish, or a well-cooked carrot. It's not a vegetarian or vegan, issue. It's just that some people just need the help of animals to get themselves grounded again and get themselves together. A lovely part of this course that we've designed is meal composition. And what meal composition teaches is, we basically teach a breakfast, or a number of breakfast options, lunch options, and dinner, and how you would prepare it for an athlete. But what's important is, within these breakfast, lunch, and dinners, is balancing the meal. So balancing in the form of how much oil. If every component of a meal has oil in it, it's not going to serve the athlete. We work with ways. I teach you how to reduce the amount of oil. Say, for example, if you have an athlete who needs to watch their weight, we learn about the balancing of salt and the importance of salt for the transformation of cooking, which is vital. We balance the proteins as well. So not only meat, animal proteins, I help you be able to feed a vegetarian or a vegan athlete at the same time. So we work with plant proteins as well, which is important. And then we bring it all together by looking at the different tastes in each meal. In other words, all 5 tastes, and the tastes are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, pungent. all 5 tastes need to be present in the one sitting of the meal, because if they're not, you end up finding the athlete going to reach for something else. So what we find often is that we forget to include something sweet in our cooking process. And then what happens is someone wants dessert. So how did we do that in our dinner tonight of haggis and veggies and what did we have? Turnip. Is I slow cooked the turnip, and that crystallized the sugars of the turnip and made it beautifully sweet. And over and above that, I sealed some carrots in our stir fry. I slow sealed those, and that brought out and caramelized the sugars. So do I feel like I need a dessert? Nope, I'm absolutely satisfied. I feel really satisfied from my meal. So this is what we need to teach people, that they need to feel satisfied after a meal. If you've forgotten the bitter, they'll want some coffee. And maybe they ate late. Maybe they had to eat at 8 o'clock because that's the time they got home from traveling and And then they go for coffee, and then that screws up their sleep. And because it affects their caffeine, depending on how, sensitive they are to it. So we don't want things like that. So we want to include all the tastes because it's an important part of balancing a meal. I teach you how to make foods completely, entirely digestible. So getting access from every single nutrient. And we do this in the forms of dry roasting nuts, for example, where we enliven the oils. We do this in the form of tricking those nuts into growing by letting them soak up the water and think they're about to grow. And this releases enzyme inhibitors. We talk about fermenting and using high probiotic condiments to just keep that athlete super healthy all the time. So all of it is about completely amplifying the nutritional density and flavor. Can't stress enough the flavor. Healthy food is delicious, and I can vouch for that. Perfecting your new learned cooking techniques, and we do this by me being in your kitchen, believe it or not, online. So we've got a whole lab setup where we do a lab setup. We have 2 cameras, and we go in and we do a cooking method, and you do it well. It's one of the I've taught you 10 cooking methods, and they're the finest, most amazing, most pure cooking methods that I know, that I feel would really embellish further methods that the person being taught knows. So I get to see you, helping you correct the technique if you haven't quite mastered it through the videos. There's a big sport specific component that's in there that I bring into it. It's quite fun, where we get to reverse the recordings, and he's on camera for a change, where he gives you the more scientific background. So this course can be done if you're into sport, if you've done any of Ian's courses, or it can be done as a component of just, maybe you're an athlete and you're on here, maybe you're a personal trainer and you want more information. This kind of, this would work for this as well. So for an example, our last course we ran, we had a chef. We had a traditionally trained chef. I felt intimidated at the beginning. And by the time I was done, I was so not intimidated at all, because she'd learned more than she'd learned on this course than she had in her real classical training. So it was a real honor. You walk away with so much information. I mean, I even remember discussing with Ian, I said, this course is too cheap. I did say that. And he said, no, Rach, it's not. We want people to learn and take responsibility for and empower them. So I was questioned the other day about my my sporting career. It was for one of the magazines. And the question was, well, how is your diet now as a retired athlete as opposed to how it was when you were an athlete? And I thought, damn, my diet's good. It was way better than it was ever eating when I was an athlete, and I was a national athlete. I ate anything that I saw in sight. Those athletes need people like us. They need people to tell them, and they need guidance, and they need coaching, literally food coaching, into proper ways of consuming and helping their bodies being able to assimilate and digest and know what the food is without having to wait or waste energy, trying to figure out what that food is. Okay, I'll store it in my liver, get it back to it another time, and you keep doing that. And then things start sprouting that don't need to be sprouted. And that I'm talking negatively, as in, they start having issues or sensitivities, and so forth, or slower recovery times. But back to the sport-specific nutrition. So we teach you how to make training juices. You can't really find a decent commercially bought training juice. And this is done, Ian discusses the pre, during, and post exercise. So we make the most amazing, working from the energetically whole right down to processed, but the good processed, to the speedier methods. So you get to see four different juices done, and they're done according to time, preparation and those sorts of things. And from the highest, most energetically whole down to still a very good quality juice. So that's a really beneficial thing to have, as well as we do smoothies, and we take you through a demo of a smoothie, and he discusses the values of having it as a main meal or having it after training or just before, depending on where you've had your meal. So there's a good chunk of information on that as well. And then we love to bring in this picture or this discussion because we're talking about what modern science does. Modern science takes nutritional data and analyzes it and spits out, it's got this amount of protein, carbs, fats, sugars, . This is not what we focus on here, but I want to bring this in because it's important. Because this sandwich, even though it looks not bad, right? It looks like a whole grain bread with, some tasteless iceberg lettuce, but those tomatoes look okay. And that ham is more than likely full of sulfites to keep it pink and other preservatives. And that could potentially be hormone-filled cheese. We're not sure on that because we haven't seen the ingredients. But modern science tells you that that bread is equal to any bread, whether it's white, whether it's been bleached, whether it's had chemical enhancers, anti-mold agents. That's irrelevant. Whereas this kind of cooking is food is no longer fuel. And that's what we hear as athletes. Food is fuel. It's not that. It's about not breaking out the sum of the parts. It's about taking the whole food in its entirety and its energetic properties and its quality, and looking at the human in its entirety and the energetic properties and the quality of the human. So this is not the same as modern science. We're looking at a new paradigm, a new and old traditional paradigm. So how do we upgrade that sandwich? Well, in nutritional science, the sandwich you've seen before versus the sandwich that was made here that's one of the sandwiches in the actual course, is 100% different. We've got a beautiful sourdough rye here, which has 3 ingredients. It's got rye, salt, and water, and it's fermented. And those grains have been broken down and pre-digested before the athlete even gets to take one bite full. We've got smashed avo. We've got a nitrate-free naked bacon. I did a beautiful probiotic-rich nut cheese in here, and that gives other opportunities for vegetarian or vegan options. That's heaps of probiotics in there. There's dry roasted pumpkin seeds done in a umeboshi, which is a high probiotic finishing salt. There's sprouts. The powerhouse of vegetables is lying in the sprout. The sprout is the start of the tree, of the plant. So there's heaps amounts of nutrition in there. So that's mung bean sprouts. There's a good dose of vegetables as well, and that's just in an open sandwich. That's going to fill an athlete faster and more satisfying than this, even though this picture looks like it's potentially healthy. I don't want to eat that. Where's the sauce? Where's the flavor in that? It just looks very dull, and as opposed to this, which was served with a gorgeous steamed beetroot salad in a marinade of miso, which is another high probiotic. So teaching what coaches or humans how to include more probiotics in their diet, because athletes are pushing themselves, their immunity is compromised. So it's important that we include probiotics. I think there might even be, there's kimchi on the top, which is a nice heated authentic, again, probiotic rich foods. Look how many times I've said probiotic and fermented in just this conversation about an open sandwich, which is going to be delicious and satisfying for an athlete. So to tell you how our course is structured, it basically starts on the 21st of May with our introductory lesson, so we don't actually teach on that day, and then it kickstarts that next week. And week 1, where we do an introduction to natural cookery, so I tell you what it's all about, tell you how to access your centers, give you homework, ways to understand things. We already do a cooking method in this first week. The second week is energetic nutrition, and this is huge. So we go into it quite heavily in week 2. And I just want to bring to your attention, speaking of energetic nutrition, just for 1 second. If it was freezing cold outside, maybe it was snowing, maybe you're in the winter in the UK, and you had to go and sit down outside on your doorstep and you ate a bowl of ice cream, how would your body react? So this is energetics. Then the next day it continued to snow and you decided to sit outside with exactly the same clothes on, and you had a bowl of hearty, brothy, stock-filled, yummy stew, and see how your body responds. That's energetics. You know energetics already, it's happening, it's all around you. It's not a brand new concept, it's old. We just haven't been cognizant, or we haven't brought it to the front, brought it to our attention. Week 3, we go into wholeness, and what I teach you there is how to upgrade pretty much any recipe, or how to upgrade your what do you call those, food diaries that we ask for our clients. We ask them to send us a 5-day food diary of what they eat. You learn, automatic, you know how to upgrade this. Week 4 is creating and working around meal composition. So, how we would structure a meal, and that's sports specific. And then we look at wrapping it all together, where we do our second lab, live lab, a long lab, where we discuss as a class, as a team, each person's meal. So each person in the end needs to make a meal I'm in your kitchen online, and you get to make this meal and I talk you through it, and we learn from each other, and it's a huge eye-opening. There's a lot of self-correction in there, and it's a really beautiful, special moment for me, because then I get to see how much you've learned, and boy, you learn a fortune. So ordinarily our course costs £750, but we're doing a special tonight for this webinar, if you're part of the webinar, where it's £700 for the 5 weeks. And over and above that, if you are any of the band bases or students, you get the various discounts as well. If you were to pay monthly, then it works out to 58 odd pounds, and that's how you'd pay without the 10% surcharge. Ian might be able to explain more to you with regards to the fees. Let me just stop sharing my screen now, because I'm going to open up the panel to anybody who may have questions. Look, Ian, I made it with 1 minute to spare. You see, you can talk for ages on this stuff. It's beautiful, and it's inspiring, and I'm incredibly passionate, as you may have noticed, about food. I love food, and I was asked the question the other day, would I consider making some ready-made meals for people? And I said, actually no, because I want to empower people to take responsibility. And this is what we do here. We encourage you to take responsibility for your athletes, or for yourself, or for any of those people that you're cooking for. And then there's the option. If you want to continue with this, if you love it, if you're so passionate like I am about it, I can take you on another journey beyond this journey, but you would need to do this journey first, which is, going more into depth, maybe even looking at a private chef program, which is completely possible. Sorry, I'll stop talking now.
She was a long distance athlete, guys, so Rach hasn't even finished her warm up yet. There's so much more to come out, but I think she did a good job getting a complex subject into 45 minutes, and that was her remit, between 40 and 45 minutes. So well done for that. we'll open for questions. There's a few too many for you to just unmute. So if you can just pop questions in the chat box, we can get going with that. And I'll start with the first one from Michelle. Do you make your own fermented food or do you buy it? Oh, what kind of questions are for Rachel?
The answer is absolutely yes. Hands down, we've done everything from kombucha to water and dairy kefirs to sauerkrauts and kimchis to sourdoughs. That's what we do. But we give you the education, and if you're unable to make it yourself or you don't have the time, because time is a big component, let's face it. We don't want you to spend heaps and heaps of time in the kitchen and that's all you end up doing. We tell you, you know, this is what you need to look for.
Gerard asked, does the class meet once a week?
Yes, it does. So I think it's on a Friday. It might still stay on a Friday where we have live tutorials. So what we do is we release the videos. Is it the Monday, Simone, that we release the videos? And then the tutorial on the Friday? Is that how it works? Always a yes, okay. So that week video, so you just done one at a time, where the videos are released for that specific week. We ask you to watch them. Some of them have homework in them. And then you bring all your questions and anything you may have into the tutorial, and we discuss, you know, any problems, troubleshoot any problems you may have had, or open to a Q&A. It's nothing's prepared for the tutorial, so it's literally a Q&A and, you know, anything you want to share.
I'm going to ask you about legumes. So beans, lentils, chickpeas. Oh, we'll just unmute. We'll just mute here. So a lot of athletes have autoimmune tendency because they're pushing their bodies so hard, and you get autoimmune protocol type diets out there that are quite popular now, which exclude things like legumes, but also nuts and seeds and grains, which is quite stringent. What's your approach, Rach, with your cooking to make beans and lentils and chickpeas as digestible as possible?
Okay, so there's a big component of that in the course, where they're taught to do a pre-treatment with either the nut, the seed, or even the bean. You know, I remember before I had become a teacher in the school, our family couldn't tolerate the bean. And that was because we were buying the canned versions. We weren't actually cooking the bean ourselves. So the canned versions they're not the most optimal. You learn in this module, you know, how to cook a bean really well, what to use with it to make it more digestible, what it should look like as the end result, so how you know it's going to be digestible, and other materials or other ingredients that need to go with the bean in order to, you know, access the digestibility and get the full range of the bean. The same with the pre-treatments in the nuts and seeds. In their raw state, you don't access all the nutrition. So by pre-treating nuts and seeds, you access more of the nutrients, and that's what I mean by amplifying nutritional density. Oh, someone's saying my glasses are reflecting the light. Done. Oh, that's you.
Okay, Michelle asks, why did you get drawn into training in this way?
Why? That's such a good question, because I shouted at my mother once when I was doing my degree at university and said, you know, I threw something down and said, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm probably going to end up being a chef anyway. I think I was 22. And I never knew that dream was actually going to come true. And I don't want to be the chef as in the person stuck in the kitchen, because I think my passion lies in teaching people that want to learn. And that's a pleasure and a reward for me as a teacher. I did my training through the School of Natural Cookery because we are meat eaters, and I wanted to get creative with plants. And I learned a massive amount being at the school on how to made plants taste amazing. In other words, all we were doing was steaming, and stir frying. Those were the 2 cooking methods. Oh, maybe a roast. The 3 cooking methods we were using with our vegetables, and I needed to know more. So I want to work with foods that are good for your body, that give your body something, that replenish the body. And a traditional, classically trained chef doesn't do that for me, and it doesn't do that for the food. So I chose the plant-based route. So I am now a natural plant-based chef, combined with being one of the senior teachers of the school.
I'm going to throw out a word, Rach, and that's adaptability. And it's something we talked about when you were shooting the course. And I said you were adaptable. So do you want to bring that into the context of people working with athletes, whether they're coaches or trainers or nutritionists?
Okay, so as a person who's giving them information with regards to their nutritional requirements, you may need to be adaptable. You may need to they might have specific requirements. I was having to be adaptable just by doing the actual module, doing all the recordings, because I wasn't even in my own kitchen. I didn't even have my own equipment. So it was a big learning lesson for me as well. So by using your intuition, by giving you the information, by teaching the energetics, and by encouraging variety and all those important things, you're able to adapt to pretty much any diet and any restrictions out there. So we cook close to center. In other words, we don't use 700 herbs and spices. We use the ones that our body tells us to use. And that's what helps with your adaptability. By understanding the families enables you to adapt. So if they're having an issue with tomatoes, for example, we give you other fruits, like other fruits that can help replace the tomato, for example. And that's another important thing that I forgot to mention in the meal composition, how we look at the importance of including both cooked vegetables and raw vegetables, because you can get all the lycopene on the planet from a cooked tomato, but none of the vitamin C. But keep that tomato raw and you get all the vitamin C, but none of the lycopene. So the importance of including, those 2 types of methods into a cuisine, or into a dish, is important as well. Did I answer your question, Ian?
I would say so. I'm looking at the next one. Michelle said, "Where can I eat your amazing food?"
Oh, you'll have to.
When are you opening your restaurant?
I don't want to just cook. It's not my, I don't think it's where I should be. I don't think I should be behind the pots and the pans. I think I need to be in front of the pans. I think I need to tell people what to put in the pan, and that suits me. So I was thinking maybe a deli one day, like a retro health store, where I would make, but in small bits, like, a hearty cup of soup and a big sourdough bread with a big wedge of, farm-style butter that you dip in and enjoy on a cold winter's day, and authentic, healthy treats, because treats is a big problem. That's where people fall, and I love working in the sweet department, in the baking, the desserts section. So something like that, we can keep you posted, but you get to learn this information as well. So it's not exclusive to me. I'm all out there. I put my heart on the table. I wear it on the sleeve, and my dream is to help others and empower others to cook and amplify their nutritional density as much as I do. I speak from an athlete's point of view as well. So I know I ate crap. I did. I was just eating because I was a triathlete and I was working so hard and training so hard. I just needed food. And for me, on those days, food was fuel. And it's so much more than that. I have grown. Like, I'm like a different person to when I was then. And I'm telling you now, I'm eating way better and not having to monitor, weights, because when you eat, whole food. So in other words, if you're eating an energetically whole plant, like a grain, like an oat groat, for example, even a steel cut oat, there's no need to add oat bran into that, because the oat groat has the bran. So if the issue is maybe someone's having 2-minute oats and their issue is constipation, we just tell him, go back to the first one, learn how to prepare the oat. You get all the bran and you'll do all the pooing you need, because that gives you, by eating energetically whole foods, it sorts those problems out. And that's where the refinement and upgrading to wholeness conversation comes in as well. Sorry about talking about poo, but it's an important part of living, right?
Second favorite subject. Gerard's thrown out an excellent question. Is there a relationship between energetics and biodynamic farming?
There absolutely is.
Okay, how long do you need? Another webinar?
You might need to sign in on the course. But there absolutely is. It feels, to me, it feels obvious. But because I know.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. If you actually evolve through just clean foods and start to understand farming practices and so on, you then look at commercial standard farming practices and food preparation as foreign. And something I do in my practice is I think, okay, what would we have done 100 years ago? What would we have done 200 years ago? We wouldn't have had so much variety, but we wouldn't have had all the chemical story that we've had in the last 50 years, kind of post-war era. It's been a massive evolution of chemicals, which we take for granted now, but only our grandparents would have been eating very, very differently.
And another point I just wanted to mention is we actually do something quite helpful towards the end and look at the relationship to food. You know, the person, you know, you even get questioned yourself. You know, I ask a whole load of questions and ask where you sit in the relationship category with food, because this is about building and developing a relationship with food. Knowing how the plants grow is like getting to know your best friend. Okay, you've got to ask the questions, you've got to be with it, you've got to connect with it, just like you would a friend. And this is what we do and we encourage with food, because there's a lot of, oh, I don't do any fats, oh, I don't do any of this, and oh, I exclude this, and you know, and you'll learn more about yourself by looking at this relationship component as well. And it's a beautiful bond that you take with you and that you get to develop beyond this course and into your own life. And you know, it's just a real, you know, Gerard made me think of that when he spoke of relationships, and it's a very important component. And you may surprise yourself that your relationship with food is not as healthy as you think it may be. Anything else?
I'll just throw out, if you want to see Rachel's recipes, I've now got like 200 of these books sitting in my office after they've just come off the container from South Africa. So it's a book we wrote 5 years ago. Rach wrote the chapter on farming, which is quite an eye-opener, especially if you delve into the sources she's pulled, and also the recipes at the back. So even before she did her chef training, there's some quite good stuff in there. And then I think watch this space, because you know, at some point you're going to write that recipe book that you've been talking about.
It would be so good to see some of you in the course. It's super fun, and like I mentioned, the wealth of information to what you already know is going to increase. There's no doubt about it. We've had excellent feedback from our first batch of students, really amazing feedback. It made me feel that the stress of trying to run the course and, you know, not getting to the UK in time was completely worth it. So you really do go with a bag full of knowledge and a bag full of skill, and that nothing like this exists. So you're one of the unique people, and I think there's a place for all of us, and many places actually, because there's not enough of us working this way and using this information to give our athletes and to, you know, make them the best they can be, no matter what level they are. But certainly the high-end levels, I mean, if you have access to any of those athletes, this is the information you need to, you know, give them and their chef, if they've got their own private chefs teams, for example. You know, people need more of us. So you know, it comes highly recommended, and it's good fun, and there's good laughs, and there's good interaction, and there's good teamwork. So I hope to see some of you then.
Thanks, Rach. And thank you for everyone for tuning in and giving us an hour of your time. You know where we are. You've got the website, and you know, please get in touch. As you can see, Rach is very, very passionate about educating, and she loves interacting and helping you guys improve your cooking and your offering. And you know, like I've learned a lot, huge amount as a practitioner just listening to her. And you might never have the ambition to become a chef like myself, but it improves your own cooking skills and awarenesses, and also your interaction with your clients. And Simone just said she'll send an email tomorrow with the recording and the slides and all the dates and so on.
Yeah, and just as another reminder that this is not a chef course. You know, that takes a long time. This is just 5 weeks. I can't get all that information down in 5 weeks. So it's just how do you upgrade what you're currently doing, and that could potentially be steaming. And steaming is one of the cooking methods you don't learn in this course.
Excellent. So have a good evening, guys. And we'll continue this first Wednesday of every month. So also tune in next month. We've got Mike Gleason from Loughborough University talking about football.
Oh.
So change of topic again. Okay, right. Good night, and thanks again.
Cheerio.